Welcome to What is Going Om, for new thought from the edge of Om. Each week on Om Times flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Om. Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. As American families come together to celebrate one of the most important days in their calendar, the words gratitude and grateful will be heard many times. But true gratitude is more than words. It's more than saying thank you or I'm thankful for. Gratitude is an action, a practice, an emotion, and one of the most transformative and empowering gifts we can give to others and to ourselves. One person who really understands the meaning of gratitude and its value as a daily, if not hourly practice is intuitive astrologer and energy coach Patrick Geary, a former human rights lawyer working for the United Nations. Patrick Geary's experience of the transformative power of gratitude enabled him to change his career to one that aligned with his primary purpose of helping people find more joyful and fulfilling ways of life in the universe that we call home. Patrick Geary, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that I'm very grateful to be here with you.
So you made a radical and a very courageous change in your career, pivoting from traveling the world as a human rights lawyer to helping others find their truth and teaching how we can all work with time and space to create more joyful experiences of life. I want to know what prompted that change and how did gratitude play into that?
That's a wonderful question. And I think what prompted that change for me was total systemic breakdown. It was this realization that I just didn't feel happy with where I was. And I wasn't happy with who I was and with who I was being. So for me, it was thanks to my body, which manifested all sorts of signs and symptoms, from broken bones and headaches to dreams where I would wake up choking, or gastrointestinal discomfort in so many ways that let me know that it was time to make room for something new. And I had this period of time back in 2017 where I ended up taking a summer out on medical leave from my job. And that's what allowed for me to shift. Taking the time, taking the rest, and being able to see that the world wasn't working against me. I had sort of created a system that felt like it was stopping me from living the life I wanted to live. I had manifested a boss who was totally absent, and then a boss above him who was engaging in a bullying relationship with me. And as I took the time away to reflect, I came to appreciate that these people weren't working against me, that they were working for me, that they were encouraging me to take ownership of my life, to stand up for what I believed in, to move on to something that did feel right. It really is, as you said, it is that sense of gratitude, that being able to go back into the system, which I did after that summer off, but not with a perspective of, I need to fight this, I need to be different, or they need to be different. Just with a sense of, listen, we're all in it together. And so if this person is behaving in this way towards me, it must somehow be a gift. And let me give myself the distance I need to see what that gift is.
That's an incredibly courageous, I think, move to have. We can all have realizations. Whether we can act on them is another thing. And was it was there one particular moment where there was like this exploding aha, or was it just this, slow understanding, kind of blooming inside you?
I'd say it was both. It was both, this overarching, slow, growing understanding with several moments that just felt like epiphanies, that just allowed for me to suddenly change my perspective and to see things differently. And maybe to start using some of the tools that I had acquired and that I had learned over the past years in my own life more actively. Thinking specifically about one of my best friends who's an organizational psychologist who taught me so much about group relations and systems. And one of the premises of that work, as I understand it, is that everything that happens in the group happens in the interests of all, and that people are nominated to take specific roles, and they step into that role, and then they behave in a certain way, and this is in the interests of all of us, that it's sort of the divine drama that's playing out around us. So being able to go back into that environment with that grounded sense of knowledge, and I think it is peace that allowed for me to really go back into that space knowing that, okay, this is happening for me, and everyone here is doing exactly what they're supposed to do. That just changed it all. So that sense of, rather than this person is bullying me, what a jerk, I don't want anything to do with them, to think that person is doing such a good job being a bully. And what I need right now is exactly that kind of a bully. Thank you for choosing to play that role. Thank you for agreeing to play that role. And especially the role of a bully, because it's, probably easy to agree to play a role of a nurturing friend. That seems like something that any of us would love to step into, but to have the courage to step forward and play the role of the bully, just someone being able to come into my environment and treat me the way that I was treated, that's what helped me stand up for myself.
It's interesting. I mean, you're talking about, the whole family systems, which is what it is, basically, whether it's work or home or whatever. And to actually understand that this is working for all of us. Some people would say, okay, I can see how it's working for me, but I don't know how it's working for them. And I resent the fact that they're not doing anything about it. How would you, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I guess I'd say work on being grateful. And the reason I might say that is there's no room for resentment when you're feeling grateful. There's no room for drama when you're feeling grateful. You can't be in a state of victimhood and feel like someone is doing something to you, or in any of those drama triangle roles, the perpetrator, the victim, the rescuer. None of those make sense when we're grateful for all of the things that people are doing around us. So if you're frustrated and resentful with someone else, you're really just frustrated and resentful with yourself or some part of you that you're judging and you're not allowing to be expressed, and you're not appreciating it for what it has to offer. And when you zoom in on it and you focus on it, then it comes closer to you and it becomes more present in your environment. Versus when you go into a state of gratitude, you allow for it to move through.
Gratitude, grateful, gratefulness, these are words that have lost a lot of meaning over the years. They're so widely used, they've almost become kind of trite. And the way I see this coming back to gratitude, for me, the way I look at it, is it's actually a bit of a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. You've got to practice this. It is almost a spiritual journey that you're taking to really dive into it, because you're going to get hit with so many situations where you're not feeling very grateful and it's hard to practice it, but it is a constant working at. Did you find it hard?
At times I did. Certainly I would have emotional reactions or responses. I might feel quashed or disappointed or let down, or like something was horrifically wrong and I needed to go out and fix it. So it is really just like I guess I did in a much grander sense with that summer, giving yourself the reflective distance that you need to recognize that it's all coming from you. And once you can appreciate that it's all coming from you, then you're able to go to that higher perspective and you're able to reemerge into the world with gratitude. And I completely agree. Maybe it's a lost art that we're rediscovering. And it is something that takes time. It's a way of being. It's a choice.
Yeah, you have to unwind a number of perspectives and perceptions in order to, you know, take this as your perspective. Right now, in America and throughout the world, we're seeing that everything is increasingly polarized. And with so much anger, fear, and chaos and uncertainty, instead of looking at this as a negative, I know that you are grateful for it. And I can imagine that, there's a whole population that's very grateful for everything that's going on, and another part of the population that isn't. Tell us how you would speak to someone about gratitude who is very angry about what is happening in the world. What would you suggest to them?
Well, my first thing would be to be grateful for that person. I think anger comes from a sense of things aren't right. And there's something here that's being suppressed or repressed, and it needs to be expressed and it needs to be brought to the surface. And when I see people who look at the world, the same world that I'm looking at, or maybe actually a totally different world since we're all running parallel realities here, but in any case, we are ostensibly looking at the same world, and they see fear and they see things that they need to fight against. I know that they're doing it with love in their hearts. I know that the worry and the concern and the anger is coming ultimately from a place of love, and that everyone is doing the best that they can. So the first thing for me, if I were going to go into a conversation with somebody about that, would be to bring myself into a state of gratitude. And I do say bring myself into a state of gratitude. When I have experienced angry outbursts, it's not always my first reaction. My first reaction might be to pull myself away, or to feel wronged, or to want to build an army to come back and defend me. All of those things are okay. So for me, the first step would be the choice to come into gratitude and an appreciation for the anger and for the fear and the concern and the worry that's present. And then for me, it's not so much a matter of suggesting that there's another way that someone needs to be. It's just allowing for myself to be the best version of me that I can be in that moment, and allowing for me to be grateful, and allowing for me to feel free, and allowing for me to feel hope, despite what someone else may feel, and just showing that there is another perspective. And you can choose to be
That's
angry,
it, isn't it?
or you don't have to be. And I'm not going to mirror the anger.
Yeah. You and I had a conversation about gratitude a week ago when we were talking about doing this show, and you said some wonderful things that I've been thinking about ever since. And, it's lovely to hear somebody pointing the way to other points of view, because we can get so locked and entrenched in our own particular thing that we can't see the wood for the trees. One of the things, that you talked about was the fact that you're grateful for we're being able to see now what people are thinking and feeling that was hidden before. And once we know what people are feeling and thinking, we can do something about it.
That's exactly it. We're allowing for it to come into our awareness. And once it's in our awareness and we accept it, then we can make another choice. And I know that it's confronting for people to hear that perspective sometimes, that it can be confronting for someone to look at me, and you could make all sorts of assumptions about my political alignments and who I voted for and what my reaction would be to the election. You might even be right. And nonetheless, for people to see me feeling in a state of peace and gratitude for what's happening when they feel like it's just so wrong. That can be a deeply confronting experience. So I'm also aware that as I show what I'm thinking and feeling, which I do truly feel that I have more permission to do now. I sort of feel like everything is out there. It's all here. That we've all put our cards on the table. You can see my cards now. You might not like my cards. You might not like my perspective. You might not like how I'm viewing things. And even in that moment, much like when you talked about the polarity that we experience, how can I be grateful for the contrast? How can I be grateful for you giving me a chance to connect more deeply with what my values are, to more clearly appreciate what are the cards that I'm holding, and to give me an invitation to show them more proudly.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you have a number of friends who felt a huge sense of relief and freedom after the election, because it enabled them to become clearer about what was important to them, regardless of what they wanted, the result to be. And we don't think about things like that. We kind of knee jerk, don't we? And my opinion, my point of view, I have to kind of justify that, hold on to it, defend it, and I have a right to be angry. But it's interesting to think that some people actually felt relief.
It is. I was so surprised as I shared my own experience of this freedom and the sense of peace at how the vast majority of people who I talk to, and it's interesting being an American abroad, since naturally people were looking to me to express a certain tone around what's happening with the country. I was really surprised by how many people, truly the vast majority of people in my immediate circle, which of course reflects me, shared that same sentiment, that same feeling of, all right, well, let's do it. And for me, if I think about the results, this is a vote for change.
Yes.
And this is
Yes, it
really
is.
a vote for, there's a reason that Shiva is a god in Hindu mythology, the destroyer, the ripping things up. And I feel like the rule is now that there are no rules. The rule is do whatever you want and say whatever you want. And I'm actually comfortable doing and saying whatever I want because I've done a lot of work on myself. And I really know, I feel really emotional just talking about it, just how much I love this place. And I don't want to hold that back anymore.
Yeah. Well, you also, I mean, as an astrologer, you have another kind of compass to look at. I mean, you've seen that this kind of upheaval, this change was predicted. It has been predicted. And so you can look at it from a higher perspective than a lot of people can.
Yeah, God
Do you
bless
find
us.
a lot of people questioning you about that?
It's definitely something that comes up, especially Pluto with its transition into Aquarius this week and the Pluto return of the United States, which just captures so much of what's happening. The corruption and the decay within a system, the power imbalance that's now all being turned on its head in a very real way. And when I look at things from this higher perspective, it also helps me feel really grateful for the people who are playing their roles in the system. And if I look at the man that is Donald Trump, he doesn't look to me to be someone who feels comfortable and happy and at peace and at ease with himself. He looks to be someone who's really taken on a very big role and a very big burden and a very big responsibility in the collective, what he's bringing to light, the anger that he's expressing and running through his body. That has a real impact on you. So I now feel like I look at this person and I see somebody who deserves my compassion and someone who has given a voice to people who didn't feel like they had a voice. Someone who is bringing things out into the open that were happening behind closed doors for so many years. Someone who is showing all of the cracks in the foundation of the American dream. And I'm also aware, no matter what the election results were, this was not someone who was going away. This was someone who is hell bent on fulfilling his role. So if I kind of imagine that I was in central casting for who do we need to be world leaders around this time, and we needed a world leader who was going to rip apart the American dream that doesn't work for anyone anymore in order for a new dream to emerge, we have found the person to do this. So I'm both grateful for the role that he's taken, and also I just have so much compassion for him because my gosh, to live a day in his body and his life, it feels like the love is so far away or so buried deep down under all of the behaviors that we see.
It is an interesting thought. I mean, and we have to apply it to everything really and everyone that, here is a person just like me. It could be me, who maybe isn't qualified to do a particular role, but there's a higher reason for them being thrust into that situation. And you can attack me for my personality, my characteristics that you don't like, but that's not going to change the fact that I'm here to do a job, and the job has to be done. I mean, when we look at it from that point of view, it is easy, to have compassion. The challenge is getting people to look at it from that point of view.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it's a challenge that exists when we decide we want to make another choice, that initial discomfort of starting to look at things differently. Once you've made the choice and you realize how much more peaceful and loving it is to look at the world that way, it's not hard anymore. It's actually much harder to try to look at things the other way. So it's just that initial change, that move out of the drama triangle and that move into this higher perspective and that greater appreciation. The reward for that is a feeling of well-being. It feels so nice to be in that state, and it feels good for you, and you also notice the effects that it has on other people, and you know that it's good for you, so it's good for the world. So I think you're right. It takes courage to make the change, and it's challenging, and it is a practice. And also, the rewards are self-evident, much like any change you make to better your well-being. You're not going to want to go back to the old way.
No. And we're not, I think, by nature, and we're certainly not by culture, the kind of people who have an awful lot of time to sit and reflect and contemplate, on looking at all sides of a situation. We tend to have our own take on it, and we stick to that, and we don't look beyond it. And I think, with the way that technology is today and everything is so fast and attention spans so short, it's hard for people to find that time. But, right now I'm feeling grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to think about this, really think about it, and, modify some of my own thoughts and attitudes here.
Well, I can only mirror your gratitude and join you in it, as we are connected. And truly, it is that sense of reflective distance that we take sometimes from the world around us to remember our place and our role. And I think this is what I found in a lot of the people I spoke with. They'd given themselves that distance. This isn't the first time that people have experienced an election season like this. It's been going on for how long can I think? I mean, what, 24 years? I remember in 2000 when George Bush was elected. I remember my response and my reaction, and then the re-election. I was allowing myself to be traumatized again and again and again by these elections. And then here in the UK with Brexit, just one after another. It was actually Brexit for me that was my own personal change point, my crisis point of I just can't do this to myself anymore. My happiness is not dependent on the results of an election. And what I see in the world doesn't need to change. just because one candidate has won over the other. Both of those energies are still very much there and present, and I can be happy with either possibility. And I think that maybe that is why gratitude allows for things to move forward, because it's that knowing I can be happy with whatever happens around me. And that means that things can continue to happen. Versus when we go into that state of resistance and we say that things are wrong, then we fight and we exhaust ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the Beatles song, "Let It Be." You talked earlier about this drama triangle of victim, perpetrator, and rescuer, and we're seeing this play out all the time. We are personally experiencing this at various times throughout our own lives. Do you have any personal examples of how gratitude allowed you to shift out of those patterns?
That is a fantastic question. And the one that comes to my mind most was this long-standing pattern that I experienced many times of pushing myself out of a job and creating a situation where I needed to be the victim and I needed to be the scapegoat, and therefore I needed someone else to come in and attack me and treat me poorly. And I did this in so many different ways over the course of my career. And there were so many people who stepped into that role. And I think it wasn't just that moment of gratitude I felt when I had that summer away and I was able to see this pattern and able to see the person who was in that role and what they were doing for me. It was zooming out even a level more and recognizing this isn't just this person. Why is it that wherever I go, I seem to create a bully? I seem to create somebody who doesn't respect me and who's stepping on my toes. So it wasn't just that one incident, it was that recognition of this much deeper pattern. And then I got to be grateful for the awareness that I was having that then sort of spread across time and space, where I could now see it's like that gratitude that took me out of the drama triangle, not just in that one instance, but across my whole life, both for the future, because it happened again. I went into another situation. This one, I recognized it much faster. I stopped it much sooner. I came into a place of gratitude much earlier. Thank you to the practice that I had developed. But it wasn't the end. So for me, it is that knowing that it's always possible, that recognition that it's always me who's creating it. And then once I know that, I can move out of that space of something different needs to be done here.
And yeah, and it's still a challenge for many people to even begin to contemplate that they could be the cause of what is happening in their life. We just don't like to look at ourselves very closely. But I love, you said at the beginning about, gratitude. For me, it's something you said, I can't recall the exact words, but we cannot be angry when we're grateful or something like that. I've noticed that when we're in love, when we are excited, when our energy is all, we're kind of expanding with the joy of spring and being in love and seeing ourselves through someone else's eyes, etc., there is no time, no space for hatred of any kind or any other emotion. It's all gratitude, it's all joy, it's all excitement. And yet we fall out of these spaces so easily.
We sure do. And maybe gratitude is that pathway back into that space, that recognition of, wait a second, I'm not looking at my world with appreciation. I'm not looking for the love. I'm looking away from the love. I'm looking at all of the things that I think are wrong and judging them. I think it's so funny how we can look at our world our world in the daytime and treat it that way. You know, when I often compare how we interpret our lives to how we interpret our dreams. And we know that our dreams, or we accept that our dreams are just coming from us, right? No one else is having the same dream as me. It's just my dream. And then when you wake up and you interpret your dream, you might talk about the emotions, you might talk about what you saw, but you wouldn't say, well, in that dream, I was going to Paris and I really should have been going to Milan. And I think I left home too late. I should have left that earlier. And why was I wearing that black trench coat in my dream instead of the brown trench coat? It just like we pick things apart. And it's so strange to me that we do that in our lives, that rather than listening to them, rather than picking up on them and seeing what the message is, we resist it, we push it away, we say that it's wrong. We enter into one of those roles. Either someone is attacking us, or we are attacking them, or we need to save someone. Because when you're in the drama triangle, you just continue to change roles in perpetuity. So, and that's that sense that I often find is that interpreting with a, I guess I could say, a negative lens.
Yeah. I'm thinking that it would be wonderful. There was a trend some time ago for coloured elastic bands that people would wear on their wrist, and if they had a craving for a cigarette, or they were trying to remind themselves of something, they would snap that band. I think there should be a gratitude band on our wrists, so that every time we're feeling poor me, pity me, I'm the victim, or whatever, we can see that and be reminded to have gratitude in that moment. Somebody
Absolutely.
could get very rich very quick on that idea.
I think so. I mean, it's so key.
It is. It is. We're going to take a short break now and think about that thought. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is intuitive astrologer and energy coach Patrick Geary, and we're discussing the meaning of true gratitude and why it's the way through all of our personal, political, and global drama triangles. We'll be back with more from Patrick Geary in a few moments. Stay tuned. Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Times flagship radio show What Is Going On, and as an author, editor and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees and no BS, just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene Keys is basically the code book of life. In the Gene Keys, the book is made up of these 3 levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is from is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the Siddhi. And the Siddhis are very exalted words, and it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey, and the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Patrick Geary, you believe that gratitude is critical in addressing social injustices. How do we navigate that?
That is such a great question. And social injustice for me was such a hot button topic for decades of my life. You know, becoming a lawyer, becoming a human rights lawyer, specifically looking at all of these things that happen in the world and looking at them with anger, looking at them at times with outrage, also looking at them with pain and with hurt and with suffering, which can happen when you bathe yourself in that knowledge and those experiences, when you connect with people who have been through those things. What really strikes me is that when we go through times in our life that feel really, really difficult and that feel so sticky and painful and just awful, and I know that we've all had times in our lives like that, we recognize later, I'd say almost universally, how meaningful and important that time in our life was, how it introduced a change or a pivot that in some way brought us closer to love, brought us closer to ourselves, brought us closer to this wonderful place that we all share. So when I look at things that are happening in the world, rather than looking for the suffering or the pain or the anger or the fear, I look for the way that these things bring us closer together. I look for the way that these things bring us closer to ourselves. Even with natural disasters, people after they've had these sorts of experiences talk about how their neighbor, who maybe hated them for decades, allowed them to move into their house or invited them to move into their house after they lost their own. They talk about the sense of being alive that they feel when there's no running water and when you're not sure where your next meal will come from, how people show up and they bring you water and they bring you food and they do what they can. And there is that sudden remembering of how we really are all in it together. And it's not that I wish for wars or natural disasters to befall us. It's just that I recognize that they're doing something. And maybe when we all live in this state of love and kindness and acceptance, those things won't be necessary anymore because we won't need them to remind us.
It's a good point. I mean, you know, we do see this all the time, that humanity seems to be at its best when it's the most threatened, when it's in crisis. I mean, you know, we think about the Blitz and, you know, how people were in England, pulling together. Same all over the world. When things are going wrong, people come together. I don't know why we forget that so easily. And I can understand, what you're saying about the change of perspective here. Many people, when they see injustice, they do get angry. They want to fight. They want to change things. They feel they have to do something. You can't just sit back and let it happen. But you suggest that things like creating upheaval and marching, may not be the most effective approach. Some people would argue with you about that and say, well, if you don't do something, then you're condoning, you're colluding.
Yeah, and I would be grateful to those people. And I'm grateful to people who go out and protest, and grateful to my former colleagues who are human rights lawyers and who fight what they feel to be the good fight. I understand it and I appreciate it. And if it's happening, then it has a role and it has a place here. For me, the question really is, how do you feel when you're doing that? And I know that for me, I didn't feel well. When I felt like I was constantly fighting and that things would never be good enough and no one would ever live up to these universal standards that are human rights. They're beautiful. They're also they're ideals. They're not things that were ever perhaps meant to be realized on a day-to-day basis across all of our experiences. That is the ideal. And when I look at the ideal as a baseline and I'm constantly fighting for that, then nothing is ever good enough. And I know what that feels like. I know what it felt like in my body. I know what it felt like to be that. I've been around people who still very much bring that energy forth. It's not nice to feel angry. It's not nice to feel like things aren't good enough. So it's not for me about don't go and protest or don't go and march. It's just about what are you bringing to the party? And if you're going to go to a protest or you're going to go to a march for a cause that you believe in, fantastic. Can you do it with love in your heart? Can you do it from a place of peace? Can you radiate that instead of radiating anger, instead of radiating that something is wrong and that something isn't good enough? Can you do it with acceptance? Can you do it with gratitude?
You've said that America's external measures of success, such as economic growth and power, do not align with internal well-being, and that America needs to make a big change to prioritise well-being. We're talking about America, but of course this applies everywhere, every country, all of us. Tell me more. What changes would you want to see that prioritise well-being apart from gratitude?
Oh, I think that's such a brilliant question. And one of the things, just maybe to give some background on my perspective, is when I look at some of those external metrics that we measure America by, whether it be GDP, that's the primary one that I think of, or any of these economic metrics that we could consider, and you look at America as enjoying tremendous success and prosperity. And then the lived experience that I've had in America when I think about the government and which I guess in some sense is a representation of the collective, it's been paralyzed for 24 years. It's been constant deadlock. Very little has advanced through Congress or through presidential action. Things that are done are undone. And yes, there have been things that have moved, and I'm glad to recognize those. But when I think about the system and the system's allowing for movement, the system has become more and more rigid. Less and less movement has been allowed. Fewer and fewer things have really been allowed to change, and changes that have happened have then been picked away or taken down. So the openness to change that I've seen in America is very limited to what the whole message of the country is, the message of the founding of the country, which was all about being open to change, about freedom, about doing something new. And granted, I want to acknowledge this was not freedom for everyone who was present. It was largely freedom for privileged white men. And also, when we look at that vision and what does freedom and openness mean now, it definitely doesn't look like where the country has been for the past 24 years. It looks like it's just been in this state of polarization, deadlock, battle, fear, and excessive focus on the material. So it's so disconnected. Like the American dream, as it was articulated, is so disconnected from the real American dream of what inspired the founding of this nation. So when I look at that and I think about what do I wish for America, I wish a return to this real sense of freedom. You know, the symbols for America, the Statue of Liberty, you know, it is really a place. And when you think about the context of Europe and what was happening in Europe and what things were like in Europe and how things were different in America, things were really different. It was this pioneering, free, openness, exploratory culture. And now it just feels like that's gone because people are afraid and trying to hang on to everything that they can. So when I think about it, it is going back to openness and freedom and expanding it even more. As you know, this dream was also built on top of the land and built on top of the indigenous communities who were also there. And that their dreams and their wisdom and knowledge was forgotten. It was left behind. It was unincorporated. So when I think about the things that I wish, I think those would be the two main things, is that continuing spirit of openness and freedom and that real kind of horse galloping off into the sunset vibe that you can get. And then I also think about that deep reconnection with the roots, about the America that existed before the United States existed.
Yes.
And that real profound sense of gratitude for the land and for the peoples.
Yes. You know, and as an astrologer, you will appreciate this. I remember that Linda Goodman, who was the astrologer of the 70s and 80s, she once wrote that America was conceived on a higher level. It was conceived as something that would be a beacon for the world, you know, a model of the way that we could all become, all countries could become. And sadly, you know, it's moved away from that. But let's move on to another topic, because after you and I spoke, you know, I kind of created a bit of a summary of some of the things that you know, the really beautiful, wise things that you had said and the tips that you had given about principles of gratitude. And I've got 8 of them, and I'm going to recite them to you, and I hope that you can remember what you said and tell us again, because, you know, this should be a charter. It really should be a charter for gratitude. Number 1, let go of resistance. Say a few words about how we can do that.
Yeah, amen. I mean, I think this is the quantum truth that if you're arguing with your reality, then there's no room to change it. If you're not going to accept where you are, then how on earth are you supposed to move forward? So for me, that letting go of resistance, it's relax.
So number 2, adopt a higher perspective.
Yeah, so this is what we've been talking about with astrology. Or another one of the higher perspectives that I love is imagining that you're going into the casting room for your life and you are picking people to play certain roles. And those people are brilliantly performing their roles exactly as you instructed them to in the world around you. And I love that because it does immediately offer that awareness of, wait a second, this isn't happening to me. I'm choosing this. So I accept where I am, and then I realize that I'm choosing it.
Number 3, cultivate empathy and compassion.
Yeah. I think that really, I love this list. And for me, that
Your
really,
list.
um, that really deepens the connection that we feel with other people. So to then go into that role, for instance, so if we talk about Donald Trump, okay, he's agreed to play this role. I need him to play this role. Thank you to him for playing that role. What would it be like to play that role? What is it like for him to play that role? And how can I be supportive of his higher self? How can I be supportive of his heart in ways that help for him to fulfill the role he agreed to play in the best way possible?
Number 4, focus on what you can control.
Yeah. And that, I guess, again, brings us back to ourselves. So if I use the Donald Trump example, so I would feel comfortable sending Donald Trump a blessing. What is the best outcome for America? The best outcome for America for me is Donald Trump hits his head and then suddenly his heart opens and he really feels how the universe loves and supports him. And as a result of that, he is able to be the best version of himself. That would be just fantastic, better than anything else I can imagine.
Do you know, but prior to the 2016 election, my friend Alison Chester Lambert, another astrologer, had predicted that Trump would get in, and I said, "Oh dear," and she said no, and she foresaw just what you said. She said he's going to step up. She said this is going to change him. She said, and he's going to be the best version of himself, and it didn't happen. So, not that we're aware of. So, it's interesting that you have the same goal there, and
Yeah, well, let's say it hasn't happened yet.
that's what's in the best interest of us all.
Exactly. That's in his best interest and the best interest of us all. And again,
Yeah,
it's still possible. Anything is possible.
yeah,
So
yeah.
once I find that compassion and I can send him a blessing, then I can also know, all right, well, I'm not Donald Trump. I'm not the president. I'm not the one who is in this role. He is fulfilling that role, which I've asked him to do, and thank you to him for doing it. And this is my role. And my role is my life. It's the way that I am. It's the way that I am all of the time. So when I bring it back to me and how I am, it's like that sense of if I'm going to a protest, I can go to a protest with peace in my heart or with love in my heart instead of anger. I can't control whether other people are angry. It's not up to me. And if they're angry, it's important for them to be angry. It's important for that anger to be expressed. And it can then bring myself back to me of, okay, well, how am I choosing to be? And I guess there's also gratitude in that sense of how amazing is it that we get to create our reality, that we have the power to really choose how we want to be. I mean, this is freedom, right? This is fantastic. Can you imagine your life if somebody told you how you had to feel? Oh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. Well, number 5, seek common ground.
Yeah. My gosh, I just love the way that these are sort of bouncing back and forth too. That now that we're sort of looking at ourselves, we're looking for how can we meaningfully connect with other people. So where the person who I am and who I choose to be, where do I intersect with you? And what do we share? And what I notice is the things that we share are essential parts of being human, like love. I remember when we were talking before, you mentioned that sense of, well, what would it be like if we just showed up to a meeting and everyone brought pictures of their kids or their nieces and their nephews? You suddenly see them as human. And I might see, my boss who I asked to bully me, if I see him with his kids, and I did, it changed my opinion. Just that sense of, oh, you really care about people and you really value that, and there's a whole different side to you that I'm not seeing. So that common ground can really elevate us. I suppose there's also the other choice. We can also commiserate. We can also see common ground around complaints or around the anger that we might share. And I understand how that can bring people together. For me, as a conscious choice, I really want to go with the love, and I really want to go with what makes our heart sing. And it doesn't really matter what your political allegiances are. I bet I can tell you what makes your heart sing.
Yeah, yeah. We have 3 more in this list that was created, and we've only got about 5 minutes left, so we need to be a little bit quicker on how we summarise them. Model the change you wish to see.
Yeah, be the change. I think this is what we talked about earlier, is that sense of just by embodying my perspective and my way of being, then you can see that you're also making a choice and that there are other choices available to you.
Number 7, protect your energy.
Yeah, I think when it's necessary, this is that invitation to take the reflective distance, like my body encouraged me to do, to take that time out, to heal, to look after myself, and to reestablish my perspective, to make room for the change before I bring it out into the world. There are tender moments in that change process, and sometimes we need that safe space.
Yeah. And number 8, trust the process.
Absolutely. That knowing that it's all unfolding for your highest good and for the highest good of everyone around you. And in those moments where you feel despair or it feels hopeless, just allowing yourself to surrender. Just knowing that even if you can't see it now, one day you will.
Yeah, yeah. And you say that great gratitude is an incredible path to, growth, to personal growth and expansion.
It is, and it's a beautiful one and a gentle one. That's something I really appreciate about gratitude.
It's interesting because, people have always asked me about the books that I love, and I'm very closely entangled with books, with the shows that I do, and I've always said that as I've aged, I've realised that the ones that are the simplest are the most powerful and the most transformative. Don Miguel Ruiz's four agreements, things like that, and this little list that I created from the things you said, it's so simple that it's incredibly powerful. So I'm grateful to you for that, for giving us that.
Well, I'm grateful to you for making the list.
On your website as your gratitude creed.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's so easy to take the word, and minimize it.
Well, I will absolutely take this list and I will share it in my post next week, my Thanksgiving post. So it's just such a pleasure. Yeah.
Perfect.
To be with you. Oh my gosh, yeah. I'm just delighted. And yeah, I'm with you. Gratitude is so simple. It's just such an easy choice to make. And the more you make it, the more you realize how nice it is.
Yeah. Patrick Geary, thank you so much for joining us today. This is really, for me personally, it's been a wonderful opportunity for me to really think about gratitude and appreciate, rather than just, it's just a word. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And also, I'd say to feel it, right?
To feel it. Yeah, to feel it. Absolutely. Because, your whole energy changes, doesn't it? Yeah. So I'm going to leave everybody with one quote, a famous quote. I cannot tell you who made the quote, but if you want to find happiness, find gratitude. And I think that sums it up. So thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
So for more information about Patrick Geary's workshops, retreats and his private sessions, visit his website at truthtakestime.com. gratitude.com. And if you want to have a copy of this gratitude creed that we've just created here, I'm sure you'll find it on his website soon. And you can also follow him on Substack, where he's going to post it. So that's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another edition of What Is Going On. Till then, it's goodbye from me.